In the quiet solitude of my small, dimly lit quarters aboard the starship Elysium, I often found myself reflecting on how drastically life can change in an instant. My name is Elias Vane, and for most of my 32 years, I lived a life defined by servitude. Born into poverty on Earth's overcrowded colonies, I had no choice but to enlist as a soldier when opportunity came knocking, or rather, when desperation clawed at my door. The military promised food, shelter, and purpose. What it delivered was monotony wrapped in danger, with little room for anything resembling freedom. For nearly 10 years, I served under the banner of humanity's sprawling interstellar empire, fighting wars that seemed endless against enemies whose faces blurred together over time. We were foot soldiers, expendable pawns sent to die or survive just long enough to be replaced by younger recruits eager to prove themselves. Our commanders called us heroes, but we knew better. To them, we were tools, cogs in a machine too vast to comprehend. And so, like countless others before me, I resigned myself to this fate, accepting that my existence would always revolve around orders barked from above and battles fought beneath alien skies. The day everything changed began much like any other. The Elysium drifted through uncharted space, its crew weary after months of fruitless exploration. Rumors swirled among the ranks about strange energy signatures detected near a distant nebula, a phenomenon unlike anything recorded in human history. Command dismissed these whispers as idle speculation, but curiosity gnawed at those of us who still dared to dream beyond our mundane routines. When orders finally came down to investigate, they weren't given to grunts like me. Instead, I was tasked with cleaning up after the higher-ups, ensuring their quarters gleamed while they plotted strategies behind closed doors. It wasn't until later that evening, during one of my routine sweeps of the lower decks, that I stumbled upon something extraordinary. A group of scientists huddled around a monitor, their faces pale with awe. They spoke in hushed tones about it, a massive structure floating within the nebula, radiating power so immense it defied explanation. Some speculated it might be ancient technology left behind by a forgotten civilization. Others whispered darker theories. Weapons, traps, or worse. Whatever it was, it drew us closer, pulling the ship inexorably toward its heart. I should have turned away then, returned to my duties without a second thought. But something compelled me to linger, to watch as the feed flickered with images of the object growing larger on our screens. It pulsed faintly, almost alive, its surface shimmering with colors that danced across the spectrum. For reasons I couldn't articulate, I felt drawn to it, not out of fear or ambition, but as though some unseen force whispered my name. Little did I know, that pull would lead me straight into the path of destiny. As the Elysium approached the mysterious structure, tension crackled through the air like static electricity. Orders flew thick and fast, each one more urgent than the last. Scientists scrambled to gather data, pilots adjusted course with precision born of years of training, and soldiers like me prepared for whatever awaited us on the other side. Yet amidst the chaos, there was a peculiar calm, a sense that we were being watched, not by hostile forces, but by something far greater. When the ship finally docked alongside the colossal artifact, the silence was deafening. No alarms blared, no defenses activated. It simply loomed there, impossibly vast and serene, its presence both inviting and unnerving. The decision to send a reconnaissance team inside fell swiftly, bypassing protocol in favor of sheer necessity. Naturally, I wasn't chosen for the mission. Servants rarely are. But when one of the selected soldiers collapsed from exhaustion mere moments before departure, I stepped forward without hesitation. Perhaps it was fate, perhaps desperation, or perhaps just the lingering echo of that inexplicable pull I'd felt earlier. Whatever the reason, I found myself clad in armor far too heavy for comfort, standing shoulder to side with hardened veterans as we crossed the threshold into the unknown. The interior of the structure defied logic. Walls shifted and shimmered, pulsating with light that seemed to breathe. Strange symbols etched into the surfaces glowed faintly, casting eerie shadows that danced across our faces. Every step echoed unnaturally, as though the very fabric of reality bent to accommodate our presence. The air smelled metallic yet sweet, filling my lungs with a mixture of unease and wonder. My companions exchanged wary glances, their weapons drawn but trembling slightly in their hands. None of us spoke. Words felt trivial here, swallowed whole by the oppressive grandeur of our surroundings. We moved deeper, guided only by instinct and the faint hum of energy emanating from somewhere ahead. The corridors twisted unpredictably, leading us ever closer to what could only be described as a throne room. Its entrance yawned open before us, framed by towering arches adorned with intricate carvings that seemed to tell stories older than time itself. As we hesitated at the threshold, a sound rippled through the chamber, a low, melodic resonance that vibrated deep within my chest. It wasn't a voice, not exactly, but it carried weight, authority, and something else I couldn't quite place. Hope, longing, or perhaps recognition. And then she appeared. She emerged from the shadows as though summoned by the universe itself, her form radiant and otherworldly. She stood tall, her body draped in flowing garments that shimmered like liquid starlight, cascading down her frame in waves of silver and gold. Her skin glowed faintly, an ethereal luminescence that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the structure around us. Her eyes, oh, her eyes, were unlike anything I had ever seen. They burned with an inner fire, twin galaxies swirling within their depths, drawing me in and holding me captive. Her hair flowed freely, a cascade of midnight black streaked with strands of pure white, as if the cosmos itself had woven it strand by strand. But it wasn't just her appearance that commanded attention, it was her presence. She exuded power, not the brutish kind wielded by conquerors, but something far more profound. It was as though the air itself bent to her will, thickening with reverence. Her every movement was deliberate, graceful, and imbued with an elegance that transcended mere physicality. Even the hardened soldiers beside me faltered under her gaze, their weapons lowering instinctively as though resistance would be futile. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was music incarnate. Each word resonated like a chord struck on an ancient instrument, reverberating through the chamber and settling deep within my soul. She addressed us not as invaders or intruders, but as equals, or perhaps, curiously, as subjects worthy of consideration. Her tone carried no malice, only a quiet authority that demanded obedience without coercion. "You have come," she said, her lips barely moving, yet her voice filling the vast space effortlessly. "And now you stand before me." Her demeanor shifted subtly as her gaze swept over our group, lingering momentarily on each face before finally resting on mine. There was something in her expression, an intensity, a focus, that made my breath catch in my throat. For a fleeting moment, I felt as though she saw not just the man standing before her, but every fragment of my past, present, and potential future. It was unsettling, yet strangely comforting, as if she understood the weight of my insignificance and chose to acknowledge it anyway. "I am Queen Saraphina," she continued, her voice softening slightly, though it retained its commanding edge. "Ruler of this realm and guardian of its secrets." Her words carried no arrogance, only a quiet certainty that brooked no argument. "You seek answers, do you not? Knowledge of what lies beyond your fragile understanding of existence." She paused, tilting her head slightly as though considering whether we were worthy of such revelations. "But knowledge comes at a price. Are you prepared to pay it?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Around me, my comrades shifted uncomfortably, their faces masks of uncertainty. I wanted to look away, to break free from the gravitational pull of her gaze, but I couldn't. Something about her, the way she carried herself, the way she spoke, stirred emotions I hadn't realized I possessed. It wasn't fear, nor was it awe alone. It was something deeper, something primal. In that moment, I understood why legends spoke of beings like her, why civilizations rose and fell in their wake. And then, as if sensing my turmoil, she smiled. It was a small gesture, barely noticeable, but it transformed her entirely. The galaxy in her eyes softened, the fire dimming just enough to reveal a flicker of vulnerability. For the first time since stepping into this alien world, I felt a connection, not as servant to ruler, nor human to alien, but as one sentient being to another. Whatever happened next, I knew my life would never be the same. The Queen's smile lingered for a heartbeat longer before vanishing, leaving behind an enigmatic calm that filled the chamber. She took a single step forward, her movements fluid and deliberate, each motion radiating grace and power. The soldiers flanking me stiffened, their instincts screaming caution, but none dared raise their weapons again. There was something disarming about her presence, something that transcended fear or aggression. Even the most battle-hardened among us seemed to shrink under the weight of her gaze, reduced to mere mortals in the face of her divinity. "Tell me," she began, her voice weaving through the air like silk. What drives you to venture so far from your home? What compels you to trespass where few dare tread? Her words were not accusatory, but probing, as if she sought to unravel the threads of our motivations. One of my comrades, a burly sergeant named Cale, cleared his throat nervously and stammered out an answer about duty and exploration. She listened intently, her head tilted slightly, but her expression remained unreadable. When he finished, she nodded once, acknowledging his response without comment. Then her eyes returned to me. Again, that strange intensity settled over me, pinning me in place as though she could see straight through my armor, past my flesh, and into the core of who I was. I felt exposed, stripped bare of all pretense. My mind raced, searching for something, anything to say, but the words caught in my throat. How could I explain the hollow ache of servitude, the gnawing desire for meaning in a life defined by orders and obedience? How could I convey the quiet despair of knowing I was nothing more than a cog in a machine too vast to care? You, she said softly, her voice cutting through the silence like a blade. You are different. Her words startled me, jolting me out of my thoughts. Different? I glanced at my comrades, half expecting them to laugh or scoff, but they avoided my gaze, their expressions uneasy. There is something within you, she continued, her tone thoughtful, almost curious. A spark. A defiance buried beneath layers of resignation. Do you deny this? I opened my mouth to protest, to insist that I was no one special, just another grunt following orders, but the words died before they could form. Denial felt futile in her presence, as though she already knew the truth better than I did. Instead, I shook my head slowly, unable to meet her piercing gaze. She stepped closer, her movements unhurried yet deliberate, until she stood mere feet away. The air between us seemed to hum with energy, charged with an unspoken connection I couldn't begin to comprehend. "What is your name?" she asked, her voice softer now, almost intimate. The question caught me off guard. Names meant little in the grand scheme of things, especially for someone like me. Yet when I answered, Elias, it felt significant, as though speaking it aloud gave it new weight. She repeated it, rolling the syllables off her tongue as if savoring their taste. Elias, she murmured, her lips curling into the faintest hint of a smile. A name steeped in simplicity, yet carrying echoes of strength. You carry burdens heavier than those of your companions, do you not? Her insight unnerved me. How could she possibly know? And yet, she did. She saw the cracks in my facade, the weariness etched into my soul. She saw the parts of me I had buried so deeply even I had forgotten they existed. I wanted to look away, to shield myself from her penetrating gaze, but I couldn't. There was no escape. Not from her, not from the truth she forced me to confront. You are more than you believe yourself to be, she said, her voice firm now, carrying an authority that brooked no argument. More than the role you have been assigned. More than the chains you have allowed to bind you. Her words struck a chord deep within me, stirring emotions I had long suppressed. Anger, resentment, yearning. All of it bubbled to the surface, threatening to overwhelm me. I clenched my fists, fighting to maintain control, but the storm inside raged on. And then, as if sensing my turmoil, she reached out. Her hand hovered inches from my cheek, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her fingertips. For a moment, I thought she might touch me, but she pulled back, letting her arm fall gracefully to her side. You have suffered, she said, her voice tinged with something akin to sorrow. But suffering shapes us. It molds us into who we are meant to become. Tell me, Elias, what do you wish to become? Her question hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. I stared at her, my mind racing, my heart pounding. What did I want? Freedom, purpose, redemption. The answers eluded me, slipping through my grasp like smoke. All I knew was that standing before her, bathed in the glow of her presence, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. Alive, and achingly vulnerable. Before I could respond, she turned her attention back to the rest of the group, her demeanor shifting once more. Gone was the intimacy of our exchange, replaced by the regal poise of a ruler addressing her subjects. "You have trespassed upon sacred ground," she declared, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Yet I sense no malice in your hearts. For this, I shall grant you mercy. Leave this place, and speak of what you have seen to no one. Return to your people, and remember this day. Remember that there are powers in this universe far beyond your comprehension." Her words sent a ripple of unease through the group. Some nodded hesitantly, others exchanged wary glances, but none dared argue. Then, as if dismissing them entirely, she turned her focus back to me. "But you," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper that only I could hear. "You will remain." The declaration hit me like a thunderclap, sending shockwaves through my entire being. Remain. The word echoed in my mind, bouncing off the walls of my consciousness until it drowned out all other thoughts. My comrades froze, their faces masks of confusion and disbelief. "Your Majesty," Kale stammered, stepping forward despite the palpable tension in the air. "With respect, he's just a servant. He's not equipped for—" "He is precisely who I require," the Queen interrupted, her voice sharp enough to slice through steel. The authority in her tone silenced Kale instantly, reducing him to a statue of stunned silence. She didn't elaborate, didn't offer explanations or justifications. To her, it seemed, the matter was settled. And perhaps it was. In her presence, resistance felt futile, as though arguing would be akin to challenging the laws of nature themselves. The others hesitated, their loyalty warring with their instinct to obey her command. Finally, with reluctant nods and muttered assurances that they would return for me if possible, they filed out of the chamber, their footsteps fading into the distance. I watched them go, a strange mixture of relief and dread pooling in my stomach. Relief because I was spared the humiliation of returning to my mundane existence, and dread because I had no idea what lay ahead. Alone with the Queen, I felt both insignificant and overwhelmingly conspicuous, as though the universe itself had narrowed its focus to this single moment. She regarded me with an expression I couldn't decipher, part curiosity, part determination, and perhaps a trace of something softer. "Come," she said, extending her hand toward me. It was not a request but an invitation, one that carried the weight of inevitability. I hesitated, my feet rooted to the spot, my mind grappling with the enormity of what was unfolding. This wasn't supposed to happen. Men like me didn't get plucked from obscurity and thrust into the orbit of beings like her. Yet here I was, standing at the precipice of a destiny I hadn't asked for but couldn't escape. Taking a shaky breath, I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. Her hand remained extended, waiting, and when I finally placed mine in hers, a jolt of energy surged through me, startling in its intensity. It wasn't painful, but it was undeniable, a tangible connection that seemed to bridge the gap between us, binding me to her in ways I couldn't yet understand. Her fingers closed around mine, warm and steady, and for the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. Not as a soldier, not as a servant, but as a person. Without another word, she turned and began to lead me deeper into the labyrinthine structure. Her grip on my hand was firm but gentle, guiding me with an assurance that left no room for doubt. The corridors we traversed seemed to shift and change around us, their surfaces shimmering with patterns that pulsed in time with her steps. The air grew warmer, heavier, charged with an energy that prickled against my skin. I followed her in silence, my mind racing with questions I lacked the courage to ask. Where was she taking me? What did she intend to do with me? And why had she chosen me? As we walked, fragments of memory surfaced unbidden, flashes of moments from my past that I had long buried. The sting of rejection when I was passed over for promotions. The ache of loneliness that accompanied nights spent staring at the stars, wondering if anyone out there cared about the struggles of a lowly grunt. The suffocating weight of a life defined by servitude, where dreams were luxuries I couldn't afford. Each memory felt sharper now, more vivid, as though the Queen's presence had peeled back the layers of numbness I had wrapped around myself for protection. And then, abruptly, we stopped. We stood before a doorway unlike any I had seen before, its frame carved with intricate designs that seemed to writhe and twist as though alive. Beyond it lay a chamber bathed in golden light, its center dominated by a pedestal upon which rested an object I couldn't immediately identify. The Queen released my hand and gestured for me to enter. "This is where your journey begins," she said, her voice resonating with a gravity that sent shivers down my spine. "Step forward, Elias. Embrace what awaits you." My legs moved almost of their own accord, carrying me into the chamber as though drawn by an invisible thread. The air here was different, thicker, richer, infused with a sense of purpose that made my chest tighten. I approached the pedestal cautiously, my eyes fixed on the object resting atop it. It was a crystal, faceted and glowing with an inner light that pulsed in sync with my heartbeat. As I reached out to touch it, the Queen's voice rang out behind me, clear and unwavering. "This is your trial," she said. "Prove yourself worthy, and you will ascend to a destiny greater than you can imagine." The weight of her words settled over me, pressing down with the force of inevitability. I had no choice but to comply. For better or worse, my fate was now intertwined with hers. The crystal pulsed brighter as my fingers brushed its surface, sending a cascade of warmth through my body. It wasn't painful, but it was overwhelming. A flood of sensations that felt like memories I'd never lived, emotions I'd never experienced, and visions of places I couldn't name. My knees buckled under the intensity, and I dropped to the floor, clutching at the pedestal for support. The Queen's voice reached me faintly, though it seemed to come from miles away. "Do not resist," she said, her tone calm yet firm. "Let it show you what lies within." Within? What did she mean? The question barely formed in my mind before another wave of energy surged through me, this time accompanied by images so vivid they blurred the line between reality and imagination. I saw myself standing on a battlefield, not as a soldier following orders, but as a leader rallying others to fight for something greater than survival. I saw flashes of alien worlds bathed in hues no human eye should be able to perceive, their skies alive with shifting colors and their landscapes teeming with life forms both beautiful and terrifying. And then, most startling of all, I saw her, the Queen, standing beside me, her hand in mine, her gaze filled with an emotion I couldn't place but desperately wanted to understand. But these weren't just visions. They were possibilities. Futures that could be mine if I chose to embrace them. The weight of choice pressed down on me, heavier than any armor I'd ever worn. Could I step into such a role? Did I even deserve it? Doubt clawed at the edges of my mind, threatening to pull me under. Yet amidst the chaos, there was clarity, a quiet certainty that this moment, however daunting, was meant for me. I forced myself to stand, my legs trembling beneath me. The crystal's glow dimmed slightly, as if responding to my resolve. Turning to face the Queen, I found her watching me intently, her expression unreadable but her eyes alight with anticipation. She didn't speak, didn't offer guidance or reassurance. This was my trial, and I had to navigate it alone. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice hoarse but steady. "Why have you chosen me?" Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, one that held more mystery than answers. "Because you are broken," she replied, her words cutting through the silence like a blade. "And because only those who are broken can truly rebuild. You carry scars, Elias, scars of servitude, of loss, of dreams abandoned. But within those scars lies strength. Strength I need." Her admission struck me harder than any blow I'd ever taken in battle. Broken. The word echoed in my mind, stirring up old wounds I thought I'd buried. For years, I'd convinced myself that my insignificance was a shield, protecting me from the pain of wanting more than I could ever have. But now, stripped bare before her, I realized how wrong I'd been. My brokenness wasn't a weakness, it was the foundation upon which I could build something new. Something better. "And if I fail?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She tilted her head, considering the question. "Failure is not an option," she said simply. "Not for you. Not for us." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Was she suggesting? No, I couldn't let myself think about that yet. One step at a time. First, I had to prove myself worthy of whatever destiny she envisioned for me. Taking a deep breath, I turned back to the crystal. Its light flared again, brighter this time, and the chamber around us began to shift. The walls dissolved into swirling patterns of light and shadow, and the ground beneath my feet shimmered as though made of liquid glass. I felt the pull of the unknown tugging at me, urging me forward. Whatever this trial entailed, it was beginning now. "Trust yourself," the Queen said softly, her voice a lifeline in the storm. "And trust me." With that, she stepped back, allowing the chamber to envelop me completely. The crystal rose from the pedestal, hovering in midair as it emitted a low hum that resonated deep within my chest. Instinctively, I reached out to touch it again, and the world around me dissolved into light. When the brilliance faded, I found myself standing in a desolate landscape unlike anything I'd ever seen. The sky above was a swirling mass of crimson clouds, casting an eerie red glow over the barren terrain. Jagged rocks jutted out of the cracked earth, their surfaces etched with strange symbols that pulsed faintly with the same energy as the crystal. A cold wind swept across the land, carrying with it whispers that sounded almost like voices speaking in languages I didn't recognize but somehow understood. Before I could process my surroundings, movement caught my eye. Figures emerged from the shadows, their forms humanoid but distorted, as if they existed somewhere between flesh and spirit. They wore armor made of blackened metal, their faces obscured by helmets shaped like animal skulls. In their hands, they carried weapons that glowed with an unnatural light, and their eyes, visible through narrow slits in their helmets, burned with malice. They surrounded me in silence, forming a loose circle that tightened with each passing second. My heart pounded in my chest, adrenaline coursing through my veins. I reached instinctively for the weapon at my side, only to find it missing. Of course. This wasn't a test of combat skill. It was something deeper, more primal. One of the figures stepped forward, raising its weapon. It spoke, its voice a guttural growl that reverberated through the air. "Prove your worth, servant, or perish." The words ignited a spark within me, a flicker of defiance that refused to be extinguished. Servant. The label stung, not because it was inaccurate but because it reminded me of everything I'd fought to escape. I clenched my fists, feeling the raw power of determination surge through me. If this was my trial, then I would face it head-on, not as a servant, but as a man ready to claim his destiny. "I am not here to serve," I said, my voice ringing out with unexpected strength. "I am here to rise." The figure hesitated, tilting its head as though puzzled by my response. Then, without warning, it lunged, its weapon slicing through the air toward me. I dodged instinctively, rolling to the side as the blade struck the ground where I'd been standing moments before. The impact sent shock waves rippling outward, cracking the earth beneath my feet. More figures joined the fray, their movements swift and coordinated. I fought back with everything I had, using every ounce of training and instinct to evade their attacks. But it wasn't enough. Their numbers overwhelmed me, their weapons finding their mark more often than I cared to admit. Pain flared across my body, sharp and unrelenting, but I refused to fall. Each strike fueled my resolve, pushing me closer to the edge of something I couldn't yet define. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take another step, the crystal reappeared in my hand. Its light flared brilliantly, illuminating the battlefield and forcing the figures to retreat. The whispers in the wind grew louder, coalescing into a single voice that echoed in my mind. "You are more than you believe," it said, and I recognized it as the Queen's voice. "Let go of fear. Let go of doubt. Become who you are meant to be." The words resonated deep within me, unlocking something I hadn't known was there. Power surged through my veins, raw and untamed, filling me with a sense of purpose that eclipsed all else. The crystal responded to my newfound strength, its glow intensifying until it became a beacon of light in the darkness. Raising it high above my head, I unleashed its energy in a burst of radiant force. The figures screamed as the light consumed them, dissolving their forms into nothingness. When the brilliance faded, I stood alone in the desolate landscape, breathing heavily but alive. The trial wasn't over, I could feel it, but I had passed the first test. And as the chamber reformed around me, the Queen's presence returning like a comforting warmth, I knew one thing for certain. I was no longer just a servant. I was becoming something greater. The chamber solidified once more, the swirling lights fading into the serene stillness of the Queen's domain. She stood before me, her expression softer now, pride flickering in her galaxy-like eyes. "You have faced your doubts and emerged stronger," she said, her voice a melody that soothed my battered spirit. But this is only the beginning. I nodded, though my body ached and my mind buzzed with unanswered questions. Before I could speak, she stepped closer, her hand lifting to rest gently on my cheek. Her touch was electric, grounding me even as it sent shivers through my soul. "Elias," she murmured, "you are mine now. My chosen. My partner. Together, we will reshape destinies." Her words hung in the air, heavy with promise and peril. As her lips brushed mine in a kiss both tender and commanding, I felt the boundaries of my old life dissolve completely. Whatever lay ahead, war, peace, or something far greater, I would face it by her side. And for the first time, I embraced the unknown without fear.